Hello, I'm Barney Kessel, and welcome to this video on chord melody playing. But before we get underway, I'd like you to meet a wonderful bassist and a good friend of mine who has decided to help me on this video, and I'm so grateful. Dave Young. Welcome, Dave, to this video, and thank you for your help on this. This is all about chord melody playing, but I like to call it harmonic treatment because when you say chord melody, it sort of infers that you need a chord for every melody note, and that's not true because you can make a lot of good music by not harmonizing all of the notes. We're going to talk about how to harmonize, various ways, and it's really not difficult. It's just a matter of learning these easy steps that I'm going to outline for you on this video. Now, this is not a definitive study on harmonies, so I think I should suggest to you that you should learn harmony through a formal harmony course and learn arranging and study piano sheets of music and see how various people handle the harmonization and the harmonic treatment of songs. But we're going to get right into this right now, how to play chord melody. Well, we're going to get started with chord melody. And the first thing is to learn the melody itself, the correct melody, and the harmony, and the correct bass notes. Because later, if you decide that you're going to use chord substitution, you want to be able to know what the right melody and bass note and harmony was to the song so that you can then become more abstract compared to the original. And one of the first things to learn after you play the melody, and by that I mean the single note, just is to play the same thing in octaves. And in octaves, you either play another octave lower or higher than the one you just played as a single melody. So it would come out something like this. Or you could play it in a perfect duet form. Now that's two-part harmony, but it's still not a chord until you get three notes. And in perfect duet, you have major and minor thirds and major and minor sixths. And they go something like this. That's major and minor thirds. Now here's sixths. Now that sounds more open. There's a greater interval between those two parts. Now, I want you to not only hear these things, and remember what they sound like, but remember what they're called. Quite often you will hear these things, and if you hear them in your mind or you hear someone playing them, you'll now know what they're called, and you'll have them in your mind and in your imagination to use when you're deciding how you're going to harmonize a treatment. And I also like to do it by association. For instance, when I think of the thirds, I think quite often that I've heard mariachi bands, Mexican bands, where the two trumpet players are playing something like this. Or in Greek music, quite often they will use sixths like this. And there's also the possibility of using major and minor thirds and sixths together so that you go from thirds to sixths. Here are thirds going into sixths, and you can hear them and see how the thirds sound closer together and the sixths sound farther apart, like. Another thing that you can do with two-part harmony is use fourths and fifths. Now here are fourths, and this is what you might hear in a jazz piece with perhaps a trumpet and tenor sax or trumpet and alto playing two-part harmony in a kind of a modern jazz arrangement. Here they are in fourths. And you can use fifths. Fifths sound like this. And I think about Oriental music, because Oriental music uses a lot of fifths, especially when I play near the bridge and play little figures that I associate with Oriental music. I've heard it comes out sounding like this in fifths. Another way that you have heard fifths and perhaps never realized it is when you hear a bagpipe. When you play fifths in the lower part of your instrument, it sounds like the way a bagpipe sounds. Another thing that you can do is use two parts creating dissonance. I'm going to play a little blues for you, and I'm going to use major and minor seconds. Now the major second sounds like this. The notes are one step apart. Here are minor seconds. That's a half step apart. So here is using dissonance. It has a certain effect, and sometimes you might very well want that dissonance. Another thing we can do is finally going into chords, which would be three or more notes. We can go into three-part harmony. That's when we use triads. That's when we use things like this that sound like triads. And that has its own sound. And when you hear this from now on, you can just remember that they're triads, and it's called three-part harmony. Now, four-part harmony has four different voices. That each note is a different note. It's not three parts with one of them being doubled for the fourth one, but four different parts. And it sounds fuller because there are four parts. And it sounds like this. And we have also 5- and 6-note chords. Usually these 5- or 6-note chords, especially the 5-note chords, are played usually on the upper 5 or lower 5 strings of the guitar. The 6 notes, of course, would include all of the strings, and here are some 5-note chords. Here's a 6-note chord. Now that we have learned these various colors and how to use them, we're going to get on to the next lesson.